The question that stopped his heart. Theater lights were soft, warm, and golden, wrapping the stage in a quiet glow. Keanu Reeves stood at the center, dressed simply in a black shirt and jeans, his posture calm but alert. The crowd had been laughing moments ago, charmed by his humility and gentle humor. But then, from the front row, Alexandra Grant lifted the microphone, her eyes glistening as she asked the question that froze him. "Keanu, do you ever forgive yourself?" For a heartbeat, silence ruled the room. Even the sound of the camera shutters stopped. His fingers twitched slightly, and his breath caught. It was a simple question, but not for him. Not after everything he had been through. Not after the love he lost, the loneliness he learned to live with, and the years he had spent trying to build peace from brokenness. His throat tightened. The audience waited. Somewhere in that moment, time slowed, and memories he thought he had buried began to stir again. Years earlier, Keanu had been standing backstage at a charity concert. Alexandra was there, too, radiant, soft-spoken, her laughter brighter than the music playing. They had known each other through art, through creativity, through shared grief and mutual understanding. She was not like others who surrounded him. She never chased fame. She saw the man behind the screen, the one who carried invisible scars. Back then, he had smiled more. His hair was shorter, his eyes lighter. The pain had been there, but he had learned to hide it under kindness. That night, she had whispered something that stayed with him forever. "You don't have to carry every sorrow alone, Keanu." And yet, he still did, on the stage now. Keanu looked at her. Alexandra's expression was calm, but her eyes trembled. The audience held their breath. Forgiveness. That word pierced through his chest like truth long avoided. He wanted to answer lightly, make a joke, move on, but the moment wouldn't let him. It was real. It was raw. And something inside him whispered, "This is the moment to finally be honest." "I don't know," he said quietly, voice trembling. "I try to, but some days, I don't think I can." The audience went silent again. Alexandra's eyes softened. Keanu's voice grew lower, and every word carried a lifetime of pain. "I think we all have ghosts. Some stay quiet. Some don't. I've made mistakes. I've lost people I love. And sometimes, when I look back, I wish I could have done more. But maybe forgiveness isn't about forgetting. Maybe it's about learning to live with what you couldn't change." He paused, then smiled gently. "So, I'm learning." The audience erupted in soft applause, not loud, but emotional. A few people wiped tears from their faces. Alexandra lowered her microphone, her lips trembling with pride and sadness. And Keanu, for the first time in years, felt something loosen inside him, a weight beginning to lift. After the event, when the cameras turned off and the lights dimmed, Keanu sat alone in his dressing room. His reflection in the mirror looked older, more fragile. The sound of applause still echoed faintly, but he felt quiet inside. Alexandra knocked softly on the door before entering. "You were honest tonight," she said softly, standing by the door. "That takes courage, or foolishness," he said with a weak laugh. "No," she replied. "Truth always finds a way to heal, even when it hurts." He looked at her then, really looked. Her silver hair shimmered under the dim light, her presence calm and grounding. "You've always believed that, haven't you?" "Because it's true," she whispered. "You've given the world so much love through your art, through your kindness. But you never give any to yourself." Her words hit him harder than she knew. He turned away for a moment, staring at his reflection again. "Maybe I forgot how." Alexandra took a slow step closer. "Then maybe it's time to remember." For a long time, neither spoke. The air between them carried a quiet ache, the kind that only two souls who understood loss could share. And as she reached out to rest a hand gently on his shoulder, Keanu realized that her question on stage wasn't just about forgiveness. It was an invitation to stop hiding, to stop surviving, to start living again. That night, he couldn't sleep. The city lights of Los Angeles painted the walls of his room in golden streaks. He sat by the window, looking out at the quiet streets below. Alexandra's words echoed again and again in his mind. Forgiveness, kindness, remembering. His thoughts drifted back to the people he had lost: his best friend, his love, his child who never had a chance to be born. Pain was something he carried like air. He had learned to move through it, not past it. He whispered into the empty night, Am I allowed to forgive myself for surviving? A tear slid down his cheek, silent and uninvited. He wiped it away gently, then smiled sadly. Somewhere deep inside, a small part of him whispered yes. And for the first time in a long time, he let himself believe it. The next morning, he woke to sunlight breaking through the curtains. A message from Alexandra waited on his phone. It was simple, just a photo of the sunrise and a line underneath. Every day gives you one more chance to heal. Keanu stared at it for a long moment, then smiled softly. Maybe that was all. Forgiveness really was not a moment, but a journey. Not perfection, but progress. He got up, made coffee, and looked out at the morning light. Somewhere deep down, he felt a quiet strength returning. And though he didn't know it yet, that single question Alexandra asked would go on to change everything: his career, his heart, and the way millions saw him. Because what happened next would become one of the most emotional chapters of his life. The silence after truth next few days felt strangely quiet for Keanu. After that event, the clip of his emotional answer began spreading online faster than anyone expected. People called it raw, honest, and deeply human. Millions shared it with words like, "This made me cry, and this is why the world loves him." But for Keanu, it wasn't about attention. He wasn't chasing sympathy or headlines. He had only spoken from the deepest place in his heart, a place he usually kept hidden from the world. Still, the reaction overwhelmed him. He sat in his kitchen one morning, sipping black coffee, his phone lighting up with messages, texts from friends, calls from directors, even strangers who wrote letters thanking him for reminding them that it was okay not to be okay. Alexandra's message came last. "You see, people needed that honesty, Keanu. You helped them heal a little." He stared at the words for a long time before typing back, "Maybe, but I think they helped me too." Then he put the phone down and looked out the window. Sunlight filtered through the leaves. He thought of how strange life could be, how pain and peace often lived side by side. A few nights later, he had dinner with Alexandra. They met at a quiet place they both loved, a small Italian restaurant, tucked in a corner of Los Angeles, known only to a few. Candles flickered softly between them. For once, Keanu looked lighter, but there was still something unfinished in his eyes. Alexandra smiled gently. "You've been quiet all evening." Too quiet for someone who just inspired half the internet. He laughed softly. "I guess I don't know how to react to all this. I just spoke what I felt. Now people are turning it into something bigger. Because truth always becomes bigger," she said. "People are starving for it." He looked down, turning the spoon in his coffee cup slowly. "It's strange though. I spent years trying not to talk about certain things. Now it's all coming out at once." Alexandra tilted her head. "Maybe you were never ready until now." He met her eyes. "Maybe you're right." Then after a pause, he added quietly, "But there's still one thing I haven't forgiven myself for." Her expression softened instantly. "What is it?" He hesitated. His jaw tensed slightly. "I never told Jennifer how much she meant to me. Not fully. I thought there would be more time. There wasn't." Alexandra reached across the table and took his hand. "You loved her deeply." She knew that. "I hope so," he whispered. "Because I never stopped." A silence followed, filled not with sadness, but understanding. Alexandra didn't try to fix his pain. She simply stayed with him in it, and that presence was enough. In the following weeks, Keanu kept a low profile. He turned down several talk show invitations and big media appearances. He didn't want to perform his pain. He just wanted to live through it quietly. But life had a way of finding him again. One morning, his manager called. "Keanu, you need to see this," the voice said with excitement. A charity organization for grieving children wanted to collaborate with him. They said his words had helped many of them cope with loss. They wanted him to visit one of their centers, not for publicity, but to talk to the kids just as himself. Keanu hesitated at first. He wasn't sure he could face that kind of vulnerability again. But then he remembered Alexandra's message, "Every day gives you one more chance to heal." So he agreed. The day of the visit, the sky was pale blue. The center was simple walls covered in colorful drawings, shelves full of books and toys. The children there had lost parents, siblings, or someone they loved. Keanu walked in quietly, unsure what to say. A little girl with brown curls ran up to him and smiled shyly. "You're John Wick," she whispered. He laughed softly. "Maybe, but today, I'm just Keanu." She giggled. "My mom used to watch your movies. She said you always looked sad but kind." He knelt down to her level, his heart twisting gently. "Maybe your mom was right about one part. Sometimes I am sad, but kindness helps me keep going. Just like you're doing now." The girl nodded and held up a drawing of her mother. Keanu looked at it carefully and said, "She looks proud of you." The girl smiled and hugged him before running off to play. Alexandra, who had come with him, watched from across the room. Her eyes filled with quiet tears. She had never seen him so open, so unguarded. For once, he wasn't hiding behind walls, he was reaching out, connecting, and the children adored him. They listened when he talked about hope, about how sadness doesn't make you weak, and how love never really disappears, it changes shape, but it stays. Afterward, as they left the center, Keanu looked distant again, but peaceful. Alexandra walked beside him. "That was beautiful," she said softly. "They reminded me of something." He replied, "What's that?" "That healing isn't something you do alone." She smiled. "You're learning, slowly," he said. "But I think I'm getting there." For a moment, they walked in silence down the quiet street. The sun was setting behind the buildings, painting everything in gold. Then Alexandra asked softly, "Keanu, when you said you don't forgive yourself, do you think maybe it's because you've forgotten how to let others love you?" He stopped walking. Her words cut deeper than he expected. "What do you mean? You give so much to everyone, your time, your kindness, your calm, but you never let anyone hold your pain. You keep it all inside, like it's your responsibility to suffer alone." He looked away, unsure what to say. She stepped closer, her voice trembling slightly. "What if forgiveness begins when you stop doing that?" He stared at her, the streetlight flickering above them. Something in her tone felt different, closer, more personal. His chest tightened again, but not from sadness this time. "Alexandra," he began, but she smiled faintly and looked away. "You don't have to answer. Just think about it." They kept walking, their shoulders almost touching, and as the night deepened, Keanu realized that something between them had quietly shifted. Later that night, he sat in his apartment again, thinking about her words. Maybe she was right. Maybe forgiveness wasn't something you did for yourself, but something that happened when you finally let others in. He looked at the photo on his table, an old picture of him and Alexandra at an art event years ago, both laughing freely. He smiled softly and whispered, "Maybe it's time to stop walking alone." And for the first time in years, he sent her a message before midnight. "Thank you for reminding me I'm still human." Her reply came quickly. "You always were. You just needed to believe it again." Outside, rain began to fall softly over Los Angeles. The city lights shimmered like tears under the wet streets. Keanu stood by his window, watching, feeling something unfamiliar in his chest, not sorrow, not guilt, but a fragile kind of hope. And deep inside, he knew that Alexandra's question hadn't just changed the audience that night, it had changed him. But the journey wasn't over yet. Something was coming, something that would test everything he had just learned about forgiveness, love, and himself. The letter he never sent following month brought quiet days and thoughtful nights. Keanu began spending more time alone, not out of sadness, but reflection. Something inside him was unfolding slowly, gently, like light through fog. Alexandra's words had opened a door he never knew was still locked. He started writing again. Not scripts or lines from movies, but letters. Letters to people who were gone, and to parts of himself that still hurt. One evening, he sat by the window, pen in hand, staring at a blank page. After a long pause, he began, "Dear Jennifer, I used to think silence meant peace. But maybe silence is just what we hide behind when the pain becomes too heavy. You once told me that love doesn't disappear, it just changes shape. Maybe that's true, because I still feel you everywhere. In the way I stop to watch the sunset. In the way I listen when people speak. In the way I try to be kind, even when I'm breaking inside. If you were here, I'd tell you that I'm sorry for not saying enough when it mattered. I thought time was forever. I was wrong. But I've learned something: love doesn't ask for perfection, it just asks for truth. And tonight, I'm trying to be honest. Maybe that's what forgiveness really means, telling the truth, even when it hurts. He stopped writing then, feeling tears sting his eyes. He set the letter down and closed his eyes, breathing deeply. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the city outside. He didn't send the letter. He folded it carefully, placed it in a wooden box, and whispered, "Thank you." The next morning, he met Alexandra again. She had invited him to her art studio, saying she wanted him to see something. The studio was bright, full of canvases, some half-finished, some bursting with color. Keanu walked slowly among them, feeling the quiet emotion in every brushstroke. "You painted all these?" he asked softly. "Over the past few months," she said, her voice calm. "After the night you answered my question on stage, I felt something change too. I started painting how people carry light after loss. Every piece here is about healing." He stopped in front of one painting. It showed a man walking through a forest filled with blue light. His shadow was dark, but ahead of him, a small glow shimmered, guiding his path. "This one feels familiar," Keanu murmured. Alexandra smiled gently. "It's called The Quiet Man Who Kept Walking." He turned to her, eyes soft. "That's me, isn't it?" She shrugged playfully. "Maybe. Or maybe it's every soul who learns to keep moving through pain." He smiled, a real smile this time. "Thank you." "For what?" she asked. "For seeing me when I couldn't see myself." They sat together after that, talking about art, life, and the strange ways grief could transform into beauty. For hours, time felt suspended. At one point, Alexandra picked up a small unfinished painting and handed him a brush. "Want to help me finish this one?" she asked. Keanu hesitated. "I haven't painted since I was a kid." "Then you're overdue," she said, smiling. He dipped the brush in blue paint and slowly drew a single line across the canvas. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. He laughed softly. "That's terrible." "No," she said gently. "That's real." He looked at her, and for a moment, the air between them shifted again, something unspoken, tender and alive. Over the next few weeks, they began spending more time together, not as a couple, not yet, but as two souls quietly rebuilding. Sometimes they met at small cafes, sometimes they went for walks, without speaking much. They didn't need to. Their silence had meaning now. But life, as always, had its twists. One afternoon, Keanu's manager called again, his tone tense this time. "Keanu, I need to warn you. The media's starting to dig into your past again." That clip from the event brought new attention. "They're running stories about your old losses, your relationships, your grief. Some of them are twisting things." Keanu closed his eyes, his chest tightening. He had always tried to live privately, quietly. He never liked when his pain became someone else's headline. "I see," he said quietly. "Let them talk." But deep down, he wasn't as calm as he sounded. He worried not for himself but for Alexandra. She had always valued her privacy too, and he knew the media could be cruel. The next morning, his fears came true. Photos of him and Alexandra walking together appeared online with headlines like "Keanu Reeves finds love again," and "Alexandra Grant, the woman who healed Hollywood's loneliest man." He stared at the articles, his stomach sinking. The internet was loud again, filled with opinions, assumptions, noise. Then came a call from Alexandra. "I saw the photos," she said quietly. "I'm sorry," he said instantly. "I didn't mean for this to happen." "I know," she said softly. "It's not your fault, but it's a lot." He could hear the heaviness in her voice. "I'll talk to them," he offered. "I'll ask for privacy." "That won't change anything," she said. "They'll keep writing what they want. We can't control that." Keanu felt helpless. "Does it bother you?" She hesitated. "It does. Not because they talk about me, but because they're trying to define us. And I don't even know what we are yet." He went silent. The truth in her words stung, not because it was harsh, but because it was real. Finally, he said softly, "Maybe we don't need to define it yet. Maybe it's enough that we care." Her voice softened. "Maybe." But something in her tone carried distance, a small wall rising again. That night, Keanu couldn't sleep. He walked through his living room, the city lights casting shadows on the walls. He sat down and looked at the letter he had written weeks ago. His own words came back to him. "Love doesn't ask for perfection. It just asks for truth." He realized he had been holding back again, afraid of letting people close. Afraid of losing them once more. So he picked up his phone and typed a message to Alexandra. I don't care about the noise. What we have is real, even if we don't name it yet. And if you ever need space, I'll give it. But I'll always be here when you're ready. She didn't reply right away. Hours passed. The rain outside grew heavier. Then finally, his phone buzzed. Her message was short. Thank you. I just need time to think. He understood. And even though it hurt, he respected it. The next morning, he went for a walk through the park. Alone. The world was quiet after the rain. He passed by a bench where an old man sat feeding birds. Keanu smiled and sat beside him. The man looked at him for a moment and said, You look like someone carrying a heavy story. Keanu chuckled softly. Maybe we all are. The man nodded. You know what I've learned? People think love ends when someone leaves, but love's smarter than that. It hides in memories, in music, in the air. It never really goes, it just waits for us to notice it again. Keanu looked at him with quiet surprise. That's beautiful, the old man smiled. Truth usually is. And when Keanu stood up to leave, the man said one last thing. Whatever you're afraid to say it before it's too late. Silence may feel safe, but it steals time. Those words echoed in Keanu's mind long after he walked away. That evening, he returned home and opened his notebook again. At the top of a blank page, he wrote one sentence. It's time to stop being silent. And deep down, he knew what he had to do next, because this wasn't just about forgiveness anymore. It was about courage. The courage to be seen. The courage to love again. And the courage to speak the truth before it's too late. The night of truth days turned into weeks, and though the noise around them began to fade, the distance between Keanu and Alexandra quietly grew. They still spoke now and then, but their words felt slower, careful, like walking across thin ice. Keanu tried to give her space. He understood that she needed time to think, but silence, even gentle silence, can start to echo when the heart is full of unsaid things. He spent his evenings walking by the beach, the sound of waves reminding him of life's rhythm, how it never stopped, even when hearts did. Sometimes he carried his notebook, writing thoughts that never made it to anyone else. One evening, under the fading orange sky, he wrote something he didn't expect. Dear Alexandra, I used to think peace meant being alone, but lately I've realized peace is finding someone who makes you feel safe enough to stop hiding. You did that for me, and I didn't know how to tell you that without fear. But maybe fear is just love asking for honesty. He didn't send it. Not yet. A few days later, Alexandra's name flashed on his phone. He picked it up instantly. Hi, she said softly. Her voice was calm, but something about it carried emotion, like she had been thinking too much too. Hey, he said, smiling faintly. How are you? I'm okay, just processing. He nodded, even though she couldn't see it. About everything? About us, she whispered. And what comes next? His heart skipped. Do you want to meet? Yes, she said after a pause. Tonight, that evening, they met at her studio again. The sun was gone, and only the soft hum of the city outside filled the space. Candles flickered, the smell of paint and coffee mixing in the air. Alexandra stood by one of her new paintings, a swirl of blue and gold. That looked like night meeting dawn. You painted that recently? Keanu asked quietly. Yesterday, she said. It's called after the question. He smiled gently. You mean the one that stopped my heart? The same, she said, a small smile touching her lips. Then she turned serious. Keanu, that night changed a lot of things for both of us. He nodded. It did. She took a deep breath. When I asked if you forgive yourself, I wasn't just asking you. I was asking myself too. He frowned slightly. What do you mean? She looked down at her hands, then up at him. For years, I've carried guilt too. For people I couldn't save. For moments I let pass. For hearts I might have hurt without meaning to. When you spoke that night, I realized how much we both live with things unsaid. We all do. He said softly. But maybe that's why we found each other, she said. Because we're both learning to speak again. Keanu stepped closer. Maybe it's not about learning. Maybe it's about trusting. She looked into his eyes, steady, kind, and open. Then trust me with this, she whispered. With what? The truth, she said, her voice trembling now. "I love you, Keanu." His breath caught. The words hung in the air like a fragile flame, flickering between them. For a long moment, he couldn't move. It was as if time had folded around that confession. Then finally, he spoke, his voice low and sincere. "I love you too, Alexandra." She blinked, tears welling. "You do?" He nodded. "I think I always have. I was just too afraid to believe I could love again." And then, without another word, he stepped closer and held her slowly, gently, like she was something sacred. She melted into his arms, and for the first time, both of them let go of years of quiet suffering. They stayed like that for a long while, saying nothing. Outside, the rain began to fall, soft and steady against the windows. The world seemed smaller now, quieter. "You know," Alexandra whispered against his chest, "you didn't have to answer that question on stage. You could have avoided it, but you didn't." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I didn't answer it for them. Maybe I answered it for you." She looked up at him, surprised. "For me. You were the only one brave enough to ask it," he said. "And that moment it saved me more than I can explain." Her eyes shimmered with tears. "You saved yourself, Keanu. I just asked the question." He laughed softly. "Then keep asking them. I think that's how we both heal." The following days felt lighter. They started meeting more often again, this time without hesitation. They went to quiet cafes, took long walks by the ocean, and talked about everything: movies, art, fears, dreams, and the small joys of life. Keanu found himself smiling more. Not the polite smile he gave the world, but the kind that reached his eyes. Alexandra's laughter filled the spaces where silence used to live. But happiness, as he knew, wasn't without challenges. One evening, a journalist from a major outlet reached out, asking for an interview about the emotional transformation of Keanu Reeves. The invitation was kind but clear. They wanted him to talk about his past again, about grief, about the viral video, about Alexandra. He turned it down immediately. When Alexandra found out, she asked softly, "Why did you refuse?" He shrugged. "Because some truths belong to us, not to headlines." She smiled, touched. "Thank you." He took her hand gently. "For the first time in years, I feel like I'm living, not performing. I don't want to turn that into a story. I just want it to be real." A few nights later, Alexandra invited him to her gallery's private showing. It was a collection of her newest work, paintings inspired by resilience and love. As Keanu walked through the exhibition, he stopped at one piece that caught his breath. It was titled "The Man Who Forgave Himself." The painting showed a figure standing under a rainstorm, face turned upward, eyes closed, a faint light breaking through the clouds above him. Keanu stared at it for a long time, feeling something inside him shift. When Alexandra walked over, he whispered, "This one feels like me." "It is you," she said softly. "It's every version of you that learned to keep going." He turned to her, emotion heavy in his voice. "You make it sound like I've healed." She smiled. "No, you're still healing. And that's the most beautiful part." He nodded, eyes glistening. "Then maybe we both are." As the evening ended, Alexandra took his hand and led him outside. The city lights sparkled against the wet pavement, and a soft breeze carried the smell of rain. She looked at him and said quietly, "That night on stage changed everything. Not just for you, not just for me, but for everyone who heard you. Maybe it wasn't me they needed," he said. "Maybe they just needed to be reminded that broken doesn't mean finished." She smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Say that again," he repeated softly. "Broken doesn't mean finished." And under the streetlight's glow, she kissed him, slow, real, and full of the kind of tenderness that only two souls who had been lost could understand. Later that night, when Keanu returned home, he opened his notebook again. Under the words, "It's time to stop being silent," he wrote, "Tonight, I stopped being afraid of love. Maybe forgiveness begins when you finally allow yourself to feel joy again." He closed the book, feeling lighter. And as he lay in bed, a quiet thought crossed his mind. Maybe this is what healing really looks like. Not forgetting the pain, but living despite it. What he didn't know was that another moment was coming, one that would test that healing in ways he never expected. The day everything was tested, the world had a way of testing hearts just when they began to heal. For Keanu, Peace had started to feel possible again. Mornings were calm. Laughter had returned. Alexandra's presence had become a quiet rhythm in his life, constant, grounding, real. They didn't need grand gestures. They had slow breakfasts, long walks, late-night talks about dreams and fears. Sometimes they simply sat in silence, and that was enough. The world outside felt distant, almost harmless, but peace, as he would soon learn, rarely lasts untouched. One morning, Keanu woke up to dozens of missed calls. His manager's name flashed on the screen. "Keanu, it's bad," the voice said when he answered. "Someone leaked private photos, ones of you and Alexandra. They're everywhere. Tabloids, social media, even the morning shows." His heart sank. "What photos?" "From your trip last week. The ones where you two were at the beach. They're calling it Keanu's secret engagement. Reporters are camped outside your house." Keanu rubbed his forehead, feeling the calm he'd built start to crack. "Engagement," he repeated quietly. "They're twisting everything," his manager said. "Some outlets are even digging into Alexandra's past. Old interviews, personal details, stuff that's no one's business." Keanu closed his eyes. He could handle lies about himself, he always had. But not about her. Not when she had trusted him with her peace. "Tell them nothing," he said firmly. "No statements, no comments." Then, after hanging up, he sat in silence for a long time. Alexandra called hours later. Her voice trembled slightly. "I saw the news. I'm so sorry," he said instantly. "I don't know how they got those photos. It's not your fault," she whispered. "But it's overwhelming. I've had cameras outside my studio all morning. Reporters shouting questions about our relationship." He clenched his jaw. "I'll fix this. I'll handle it." "How?" she asked softly. "You can't undo what's out there." Keanu's silence said what his heart didn't want to admit. Then she added, her tone breaking, "I just need time, Keanu. I'm not used to this kind of attention. I can't breathe right now." He swallowed hard. "So you're saying—" "I'm saying I need space," she whispered. "Just for a while." The line went quiet after that. For days, he didn't hear from her. He didn't blame her. Fame was never something Alexandra wanted. She had always valued privacy, authenticity, stillness. Now the world had ripped that away. The headlines wouldn't stop. Every morning, there were new stories, speculations, old photos, half-truths. Even people who meant well couldn't resist talking. Keanu stayed inside most of the time. He refused interviews. He refused anger. Instead, he went quiet the same way he always did when life became too loud. But silence didn't help this time. This time, silence felt like loss. One evening, while sitting on his balcony, he remembered something Alexandra once said: "Truth always finds a way to heal, even when it hurts." He realized then that maybe silence wasn't strength, it was fear. And he had spent too much of his life letting fear speak for him. So the next morning, he made a choice. He agreed to appear at a charity event. He had previously declined a live interview about art, life, and hope. Not to defend himself, not to explain gossip, but to speak his truth again. When the day came, the room was full. Cameras pointed at him, waiting. The interviewer began gently. "Keanu, you've been in the spotlight for decades, but lately, the public has seen a more open side of you. After everything that's happened, how do you stay kind?" He smiled softly, his voice calm but steady. "Kindness doesn't need calm times. It needs courage. It's easy to be kind when the world loves you. Harder when it misunderstands you." The interviewer nodded. "There's been a lot of talk about your relationship lately. Do you want to share your side?" The audience grew quiet. Keanu hesitated, then leaned forward. "I don't want to share my side," he said, "because love isn't a story to defend. It's something you protect." People watched silently, drawn to the honesty in his tone. He continued softly, "Alexandra Grant is one of the most beautiful souls I've ever known. Not because she paints or creates, but because she listens. Because she sees light where others see brokenness. She taught me that forgiveness isn't about letting go of the past, it's about opening your heart to the present. And I will never let anyone take that away from her." The room filled with quiet emotion. No one moved. Even the interviewer looked humbled. "Sometimes," Keanu added, "you can't control how the world sees you, but you can control how much truth you give it." And the truth is I care about her deeply, and I'll wait as long as it takes for peace to return to her life." There was silence, then gentle applause. Not loud, not forced, just human. After the event, he walked outside. The night air was cool. His phone buzzed with dozens of messages, but one caught his eye. It was from Alexandra. "I watched you." His breath stopped. He opened the message. "You didn't defend me. You protected me. Thank you." Then another line appeared. "Can we talk?" He smiled faintly. "Always," he replied. They met that same night, at the beach where those photos had been taken. It was quiet now, empty except for the waves. Alexandra stood near the water, her hair dancing in the wind. When she turned to him, her eyes were full of emotion. "You didn't owe me that," she said softly. "I didn't do it because I owed you," he replied. "I did it because I meant every word." She took a step closer. "You really meant what you said, that you'd wait." "I'd wait forever if it means peace for you," he said. She looked at him for a long moment, then said quietly, "You always choose peace, don't you?" "Not always," he replied. "But this time, peace chose me." Her eyes softened. "You really are something else, Keanu." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I'm just learning." And then, finally, she walked into his arms. It wasn't a dramatic reunion, it was quiet, human, true. Their foreheads rested together as the ocean whispered beside them. They sat by the shore after that, watching the moonlight ripple on the water. Alexandra spoke first. "I realized something while we were apart," she said. "You've spent years forgiving the world, but you never believed you deserved love in return. You give it so freely to others, but never keep any for yourself." He looked at her quietly. "And you think that's changed?" She smiled softly. "Maybe now it is." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe you've been my forgiveness all along." She laughed through her tears. "That's not fair, you can't say things like that. It's the truth," he said simply. And in that small moment under the stars, surrounded by nothing but waves and truth, Keanu Reeves, the man who once believed peace was silence, finally found his answer. He forgave himself, not with words, but with love. The next morning, they watched the sunrise together. Alexandra leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "You know, that night I asked you if you forgive yourself. I never expected it would change both our lives." He smiled, eyes on the horizon. "You didn't ask to change my life. You asked me to live it." And in that golden light, he finally understood sometimes the hardest forgiveness isn't for the mistakes we made, but for the love we once thought we didn't deserve. But fate wasn't finished with them yet, because one more moment, one unexpected, unforgettable moment was waiting just ahead, one that would seal everything they had fought for. The question that completed the circlelight was months later, when the world finally grew quiet again. The noise, the headlines, the endless curiosity, all of it faded into something distant, like the echo of a storm that had passed. Keanu and Alexandra had found their rhythm again, simple and steady. Mornings began with sunlight and laughter instead of anxiety. Evenings ended with peace instead of questions. They didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Their love wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the kind that lived in small gestures, the way he poured her tea before his own, the way she touched his hand when he grew lost in thought, the way they spoke softly, as if afraid to disturb the quiet they had both worked so hard to build. But peace, he realized, doesn't mean the end of emotion. It means learning to live with it. And tonight, something inside him felt unfinished, as if one truth was still waiting to be spoken. They were at a small charity gala in New York, a quiet event supporting young artists. Alexandra's latest paintings hung on the walls, and Keanu was there, not as a celebrity, but as her quiet supporter. People smiled when they saw them together, not because of fame, but because something about them radiated calm, a kind of love that didn't demand attention. Toward the end of the evening, one of the organizers, an elderly woman with kind eyes, asked them if they'd speak briefly about hope and art. Alexandra smiled nervously. "I'm not much of a speaker." Keanu squeezed her hand gently. "Then I'll go first." He walked to the small stage, the lights warm and soft. He looked at the audience, then at Alexandra standing near the back, her silver hair catching the light. "Art," he began quietly, "is how we remember that we're still human. It's how we turn pain into color, silence into sound, loss into meaning." He paused, his eyes meeting hers. Someone once asked me a question that changed my life. She asked if I ever forgive myself. And at the time, I didn't know how to answer. But tonight, I think I finally can. The audience went still. Alexandra's eyes widened slightly. Forgiveness, he continued, isn't a destination. It's a daily choice. Every morning, you wake up and decide not to let your past steal your peace. You choose kindness over guilt. You choose love over fear. And if you're lucky, someone walks beside you and reminds you who you are when you forget. He smiled gently. I found that someone. The audience began to applaud softly, but he lifted a hand to stop them. Please, don't clap for me. Clap for everyone here who's still learning to forgive themselves. The applause that followed wasn't loud, it was heartfelt. Real. And when he stepped off the stage, Alexandra's eyes were full of tears. Later that night, they left the gala early and walked through the quiet streets of the city. It was snowing lightly. The air was cold but gentle, the kind that felt alive. They stopped near a small bridge, overlooking a river shimmering under the streetlights. Keanu pulled his coat around her shoulders. You know, she said softly, when I asked you that question months ago, I didn't think it would follow us this far. He chuckled quietly. Neither did I. But it turns out, some questions aren't meant to be answered right away. They're meant to change you first. She smiled. So tell me then, what's your answer now? He turned to face her, his expression calm but full of emotion. Yes, he said simply. I forgive myself. For the years I stayed silent. For the love I thought I didn't deserve. For all the times I forgot that pain doesn't erase worth. Her eyes filled with tears. And before she could speak, he added quietly, and I forgive life too. For taking, for breaking, for still giving me another chance to stand here with you. She stepped closer, tears slipping down her cheeks. You've come so far, Keanu. He smiled softly. We both have. And then, almost shyly, she said, can I ask you one more question? He laughed gently. Another one? Should I be scared? She shook her head, smiling through her tears. No. This one's simple. She looked into his eyes and whispered, will you walk with me not just for now, but for whatever time we have left? Keanu's breath caught. He stared at her, the snow falling between them like soft light. Then he took her hands in his, eyes full of warmth. Yes, he said softly, for as long as I'm allowed to walk this world. She laughed quietly, her tears turning to smiles. That's the only answer I needed. The city lights glowed behind them as they stood there. Two souls who had once been lost in silence now finding home in each other's truth. Keanu whispered, almost to himself, you know, when I first heard your question on that stage, I thought it broke me. But now I realize it saved me. Alexandra looked up at him. How? Because it forced me to see that the only person who could forgive me was the one I'd been avoiding the most myself. She nodded slowly, resting her head against his chest. That's the hardest forgiveness of all, and the most freeing, he said softly. They stayed there for a long time, watching the snow fall, feeling the quiet peace between them. The world around them kept moving, but they didn't need to. Everything they needed was already here: truth, peace, love, and the gentle grace of two people who had survived the storm. Months later, a journalist would write about that night, describing it as the moment Keanu Reeves finally let go of the weight he'd carried for years. But what no article ever captured was the silence afterward, the stillness that followed when two souls finally forgave the past and chose to live. And somewhere, in a small wooden box on Keanu's desk, that letter to Jennifer still rested. He never threw it away. But one morning, he opened it again, read it, and smiled softly. He added one final line at the bottom. Thank you for teaching me that love never ends, it just changes who we become. Then he folded it back carefully, closed the box, and whispered, I'm finally at peace. As the sun rose through his window that day, Alexandra walked in quietly with 2 cups of coffee. You're up early, she said. Just thinking. He replied, about what? He smiled, eyes full of warmth. About how forgiveness doesn't end with pain. It begins with love. She smiled, placing a cup beside him. Then we've both come full circle. He nodded slowly. Yes, we have. And as they sat together in the golden morning light, the world felt new again. No fame, no headlines, No noise, just to people who had learned that sometimes the hardest questions lead to the most beautiful answers.